Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice Chair, Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
Good morning. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to CGI, and I'm thrilled that our first CGI session is about women and girls. As I think many of you know, I am deeply proud and grateful that we have integrated women and girls across our CGI programming, and I am thrilled that we have more commitments focused on women and girls this year than on any other subtopic, although I don't like to think of us as a subtopic. So I am truly grateful to all of you for making that possible, and to our tremendous CGI commitments team for working alongside you. As I think is appropriate, we're going to start this morning with a couple of commitment progress reports and a new commitment announcement. So I'd like to invite to stage Jessie Cronin, Gardens for Health International. The 1,000 days between conception and a child's second birthday, this is deeply meaningful to me as my daughter turns 2 in a week, offer a critical window of opportunity for establishing a foundation of nutritional health. Educational programs are key to creating healthy behaviors in pregnant women and preventing both antenatal and neonatal deaths. However, in Rwanda, only 35% of pregnant women meet the minimum standard in attending at least 4 antenatal care visits, and only 38% attend their first antenatal care visit before their 4th month of pregnancy. Women in rural Rwanda in particular face significant challenges to accessing nutritional health education and services due to cultural barriers, lack of transportation, and lack of partner involvement. In 2015, Gardens for Health International, with support from the Siegel Family Foundation and Child Relief International, committed to improving antenatal care and nutrition for 1,600 women in rural Rwanda. In May of 2016, Gardens for Health International completed its baseline assessment, and in August, the curriculum content was finalized. This month, Gardens for Health launched the new antenatal care program at 4 partner health centers in the district of Gazabo, with an inaugural class of 207 women. An estimated 1,242 pregnant women and their partners will receive training and peer support during the first year of programming. By working through their partners' networks, Gardens for Health will reach an additional 3,000 women in the Gazabo and Rolindo districts with nutritional advice and education. They're on track to improve antenatal care for more than 4,000 Rwandan women, which I think is pretty remarkable and certainly far exceeding their initial commitment. So please give Jessie and her team a round of applause. And now I'd like to invite to stage Erin McGurn of Scale Africa. Many students in rural Zambia face a number of barriers when it comes to attending and completing primary school. Absenteeism is high in part due to domestic tasks such as collecting water and illnesses that are too often caused by unsanitary water. These affect tens of thousands of Zambian children, keeping them at home for extended periods of time. And unfortunately, and not surprisingly, girls are disproportionately impacted by these realities. The challenges of having an access or lack of access to education do not end once children get into the classroom. Many schools across rural Zambia are in disrepair, lack modern technologies, and are without healthy sanitation facilities. So in 2013, Scale Africa committed to build Zambia's first sustainably designed technology-based community school in rural Mafuye in the country's eastern province. Using local labor, suppliers, and materials to build healthy child-centric spaces, the completed project created 65 new jobs and today serves 280 students. Building on this success, Scale Africa is launching a second CGI commitment this year, the WISH initiative, with the goal of increasing education access for girls. Scale Africa is surveying, assessing, and improving the sanitation and water infrastructure in all 28 community schools across the Mombui district. This will reach, the schools across the Mombui district reach approximately 4,800 students. New sanitation facilities will be constructed with an emphasis on girl-centric design so that girls' privacy, safety are both protected while they have access to washing and sanitary facilities. We hope that this will reduce truancy related to waterborne and diarrheal diseases and menstruation while increasing the dignity of girl students. Water infrastructure needs are also being addressed, such as boring new wells on school grounds and repairing broken ones, while basic hygiene and menstrual hygiene management programs will be implemented at each community school, with the goal of reaching every community school student and household in the district within a couple of years. Please give Erin a round of applause. And now I'm delighted to welcome our first guest of this CGI, someone I have long admired and respected and am now grateful to call my friend, Secretary Madeleine Albright. As the United States' ambassador to the United Nations, the first, although clearly not the last, female Secretary of State, and now is chair of the Albright Stonebridge Group and chairman of the National Democratic Institute. Secretary Albright has seen firsthand the importance of advancing and protecting the rights of women and the benefits that accrue to families, societies, countries, and our global community when we do so. As someone whose mission it was at the State Department to, quote, build a more secure, democratic, and prosperous world, she once famously declared, "Success without democracy is improbable, and democracy without women is impossible." I think those are good words to live by. Madeleine, it is my great honor to cede the stage to you. Please give Secretary Albright a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, for your very kind words and for everything that you do. You and I bonded a long time ago as we traveled abroad, and you were always reading and asking good questions, and you certainly have evolved into one of the most remarkable young women that I know, and it's my honor to know you. I mentioned in my speech at the Democratic Convention how often Hillary and I talk about our daughters and grandchildren, and so I know how proud she's of Chelsea and how totally smitten she's by Charlotte and Aiden. And anyone who's seen any of the pictures can see that. But I do think, in addition to being quite cute, Charlotte and Aiden are a good reminder of what is at stake when we come together in discussions such as these. Because while we used to talk in the first Clinton administration about building a bridge to the 21st century, children being born today could one day be building bridges into the 22nd century. And the work of the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Foundation will go a long way towards determining whether they do so in a world defined by unacceptable poverty or growing prosperity. I have to confess that since leaving the government 15 years ago, I've been asked many times to lend my energy to various worthwhile projects, and I say yes when I can, partly out of a sense of gratitude and obligation, but partly because I have real trouble saying no. Participating in the Clinton Global Initiative, however, has been neither an obligation nor a burden, but it has truly been a joy. And there are two reasons for this. The first is that President Clinton is not an ordinary philanthropist or a good deed doer. He is a human power source, and he has the ability to charm, educate, and motivate all at the same time. And the second, and also important reason, is that the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Foundation more broadly do good work, despite what the conspiracy theorists and demagogues say. The truth is, you cannot find a more dedicated group of problem solvers, visionaries, and altruists anywhere in the world than at CGI, and the Clinton Foundation has done more to help alleviate poverty and disease and further global development than any platform I know, and I have been honored to be here for every one of the meetings. It has done extraordinary work on the issue we're here to discuss, harnessing the power of women and girls for a more sustainable world. Now, this is obviously an issue that's very close to my heart and something that I dedicated myself to while I was in the government. I did so not because I wanted to please other women, but because as a matter of simple logic, making women's empowerment central to diplomacy and development was a step long overdue. After all, one of the key goals of the United States and the world is to promote democracy, but democracy is not possible if women are treated as second-class citizens. Another goal is to create a healthy and growing world economy, but that can't be done if half the world's people are denied the chance to contribute. And a third goal is to promote human rights, but that principle is betrayed wherever women are held down and pushed aside. With all that in mind, I have kept trying to create more and more groups of women. So when I first came to the United Nations in 1993, at that stage there were 183 countries in the UN, and it was one of the times, or one of the first times, I didn't have to cook lunch myself. And so I asked people that worked for me to get the other women permanent representatives to lunch at my residence here. When I get there, there's 6 other women out of 183. They were from Canada, Philippines, Kazakhstan, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, and Liechtenstein. Because I was the American, I created a caucus. We called ourselves the G7. Among the things we did say that we would always take each other's telephone calls, which made some of the men permanent representatives irritated that I would take a call from Liechtenstein rather over them. And I said, well, just have yourself replaced by a woman and I'll always take your call. But what we did manage to do was to get women judges appointed to the War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, because most of the crimes had been committed against women. So when I became Secretary of State, I got together a club of all the women's foreign ministers, and there were not many of us then. We called ourselves the Fearsome 14. But we magnified our influence again by always agreeing to take each other's calls. But it wasn't the size of the club that made such a difference. It was really because of the kinds of things we were able to do together. In 1999, the women foreign ministers issued a worldwide call for action to halt trafficking in human beings. The following year, the women foreign ministers issued a wake-up call about the need to halt the spread of HIV and AIDS. And so small though we were, I think that we were able to keep moving forward. And I don't have to tell this audience how frustrating these battles remain, but by focusing our attention on them, we hope to galvanize the international community to do something it would not have done had women not spoken out. Our experience is proof positive of the importance of having women's voices in the government. And that's because women can be counted on to raise the issues that others overlook, to support ideas that others oppose, and to seek an end to abuses that others accept. There are 100 different ways in which women with power can contribute to their societies, and perhaps that is why those who view women's empowerment as a threat, I repeat this, by those who view women's empowerment as a threat will resort to anything, including violence, to stop it. Which brings me to something that is too often overlooked in discussions of women's empowerment, and that is the alarming but uncounted number of women who are specifically targeted because they speak and are engaged in public life. This year, I have been determined to call attention to this problem, and earlier this year in New York, the National Democratic Institute, which I chair, launched a global call to action to stop violence against women in politics. No country can build a healthy and growing economy or establish a true democracy if half its people are held back, pushed aside, left behind, or beaten up. And what I think we need to convey in this panel is that none of our many worthy global development goals can be achieved if women and girls are excluded from the process. Of course, gender equality must also be seen as something different from and more comprehensive than simple numerical parity, because the equality that matters most can neither be fully encompassed by statistics nor based on the idea that women and men are somehow identical, which, of course, they are not. In the strictest sense, equality is an insufficient goal because equality in misery is still misery. We seek a better life for everyone, and we believe that the kind of equality that respects the rights and dignity of all, regardless of gender, is essential to accomplish that. We're of course mindful that progress in ending discrimination occurs step by step, and that each victory becomes a platform upon which the next one can be built. And our shared task is to keep building until we've raised enough platforms high enough to transform the very horizons of the earth. And that will be good for human development in all its dimensions, and it will be fitting tribute to the men and women who have done such outstanding work through the efforts of the Clinton Global Initiative. So to end where I began, with children and grandchildren, my youngest granddaughter, about 7 years ago when she was 7, said, "So what's the big deal about Grandma Maddie being Secretary of State? Only girls are Secretary of State," and that was certainly true with Condi and Hillary. Thank you very much, and I now look forward to the discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Climate Change, United Nations, David Nabarro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Group President, North America, Procter & Gamble, Carolyn Tastad. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Executive Officer, Safaricom Limited, Bob Collymore. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Founder and Chief Visionary, Dermalogica, Jane Werwand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Director for Women, Peace and Security, Georgetown University, moderator, Milan Verveer.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our sunrise service here at CGI. You know, I'm struck by the fact that we either have this event in the afternoon before the opening of CGI or bright and early in the morning. And in a way, it's symbolic because I think what it represents is what Chelsea referred to as the importance of integrating these issues across all of the other issue areas that CGI grapples with, and certainly that we'll be working on throughout the next couple days. We have a terrific panel here this morning, and I think it's illustrative of the CGI model, in this case, bringing together critical business leaders with the Secretary General's right hand on a very important initiative of the United Nations, and representative of all of you from civil society, from academia, and from these areas as well. So I'm looking forward to a very rich discussion. But first, I would like to give a little context to what we're going to talk about this morning. As the United Nations has stated, the SDGs represent a universal push to transform the world. Now, that's quite lofty. And it is very significant because it has to do with some of the most pressing challenges to human development and the future of our planet. But it's up to each of us to play a role in terms of the implementation of these goals. There are 17 of them, and there are 169 targets, which are the areas we really have to succeed at in order to achieve the goals. This morning, we're going to address a few of these goals, especially critical to advancing progress for women and girls. And it's important to keep in mind that these goals are interdependent. They aren't to operate in isolation. You really need a group of them to be working together, or we need to work at them to achieve the goals. Goal number 5 is gender equality and the empowerment of women. Clearly important in and of itself, but it is also essential in the role that it plays across all of the SDGs. I personally don't understand how we can achieve the other SDGs if women aren't empowered to fully play the roles that they need to be able to play. Goal 16 has to do with the creation of peaceful and inclusive societies. Now, our world, I don't need to tell you, is reeling from growing conflicts, from the specter of violent extremism and terrorism, and certainly from the displacement of peoples around the globe that have given us historic levels of refugees. These are very difficult issues, but they cannot be addressed without women's full participation in addressing them. Yes, women are victims, the singular victims in many ways, or the extraordinary victims in many ways, of conflict. Certainly sexual violence is one of those horrible consequences and increasingly used as a strategic strategy, a strategic tool in the wars. But women also have voice and agency, and their full participation in conflict resolution, in peace building, their role in negotiations and post-conflict reconstruction is absolutely critical if we are to address some of the challenges that occur in this space, because research shows that sustainable peace is enhanced when women are fully participating. Goal 8 is about the promotion of inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Again, a growing body of research shows that the vital source of growth that we need to see in our economies throughout the world for decades to come is really women's economic participation, both in the workforce, which has to be enhanced in their formal workforce participation, and as entrepreneurs. And, you know, it's always struck me that in the United States, our women entrepreneurs, the business owners of small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs, if they were a country onto themselves, their GDP would be 5th in the world, close to that of Germany's. That's what entrepreneurs do in economies, and women are particularly critical in this space. But there are many barriers that women confront, from access to markets, to finance, to training, to networks, to leadership, that preclude us from having the kinds of abilities to grow economies and create jobs and ensure inclusive prosperity that is so critical to our world. And finally, Goal 17, which is about the need for global partnerships to really effectuate these SDGs. And the document, the SDG document, goes into some detail about the role that the private sector needs to play to be engaged in collaborative partnerships. And we can see that that's crucial to economic opportunity in post-conflict societies. It's crucial in expanding the role of women in the formal workforce and in growing entrepreneurs. And it's certainly crucial to gender equality and everything that represents: girls' access to education, to financial literacy and understanding, to dealing with some of the huge human rights violations like trafficking, violence against women in all of its forms. So I'm going to stop there and turn this over to this extraordinary group of people sitting here, but that's the context that we are discussing this morning. So let me quickly introduce you to them. I think you have their bios, at least on your CGI app. But the far left, to my far left, is Dr. David Nabarro. He is currently the special advisor of the Secretary General's on the 2030 Agenda, 15 years to achieve these goals, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Climate Change. He also oversees a number of initiatives for the Secretary General, and I'll just name one, which has to do with the Office of Partnerships, appropriate to CGI and this panel. And he is an expert on health, nutrition, and so many other critical issues. Next to him is Carolyn Tastad, who is the group president of Procter & Gamble North America, and in terms of power, because power for purpose is all important, she represents in her division 44% of the company's revenues. That is very significant. She serves on many corporate boards, which is also significant given how tough that is for women. And she is in leading Procter & Gamble's women's leadership team. Bob Collymore is the CEO of Safaricom, which is the leading communications company, the pioneer of M-Pesa, the world's most developed mobile payment system, which I love so much and talk about constantly. He is passionate about how business can be catalysts for transforming communities, and I think the fact that he's been named to the board of the UN Global Compact is recognition of his deep commitment. And finally, but not least, the wonderful Jane Warwand, who is the founder and chief visionary of Dermalogica, a major skincare corporation, which is sold through some 100,000 therapists and salons in 100 countries. And she founded the Financial Independence Through Entrepreneurship effort, which hopefully we will hear more about. For all of you who have been consistent participants in the women and girls area, you know how devoted she has been to this for a long time. So, with that, finally, Dr. Nabarro, fill in the blanks a little bit here in terms of why the SDGs are so critical, and perhaps more importantly, why each of us is so critical to the realization of those goals, and where in all of that is the centerpiece, women and girls.
Thank you very much indeed. Milan, it was a really lovely introduction that you gave. And so what I'd like to do is to just share with you some of my personal thoughts about the Sustainable Development Goals and why they've actually transformed my own view of the work that I've been trying to do for the last 40 years. I was at Rio de Janeiro in 2012 when world leaders came together to review what we had managed to achieve with the Millennium Development Goals, the 8 goals that directed development in an extraordinary way from 2000 onwards. And they all concluded that these goals had focused attention on issues to do with poverty reduction, hunger elimination, health, education, water and sanitation. But they were frustrated that the work had been only focused on developing nations, and there was a big clamor for a new approach to thinking about the future of the world that was fully universal and that incorporated all the different dimensions of human experience. The leaders in that movement actually were from Latin America. A lady called Paula Caballero from Colombia just started the movement off, and then gradually it built up steam. There were many who said it just won't work. There are too many complexities in trying to come out with a comprehensive tapestry of actions that are necessary to shape the future. But amazingly, the diplomats in New York, supported by civil society, business, and government leaders from all over managed to find an accommodation and came up with what's called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I like it because it's the only plan that we've got for the future of the world. And it's a plan for people, a plan for the planet. It's a plan that focuses on the kind of prosperity we need. It's a plan for reducing violence as a means to resolve conflict. And it's a plan for partnerships. And it's a plan that amazingly world leaders are taking really seriously. I say amazingly because when you read it, it's like a political manifesto. It's about the kinds of decisions that governments should be making when they've got resources that they're programming, so as to ensure that there is a reduction in vulnerability and benefits for all. I'm amazed what's happened because even within the first year, we've seen more than 50 countries taking this plan seriously and incorporating it in their national strategies. Not just poor countries, not just middle-income countries, but all countries, from Canada and Sweden through to South Africa, Nigeria, Indonesia and China, Colombia and Brazil. We are seeing this plan find its way into the work of government. But it goes beyond that. Businesses everywhere looking at this and saying, can we align our business models behind the Sustainable Development Goals? Faith groups, civil society organizations, the creative community. It's caught fire. And as well as the 50 that are doing it, we've got another 100 that want to do it and are coming to us and talking about it. And we've got more heads of state and government in New York this week than ever before, and more events than we've ever had before, all focusing on this plan and the different elements of it. Two key ones I want to talk about. One, climate change. If we don't deal with climate change and deal with it quickly, we will not get forward with this plan and we will have real problems. And here in this room, I want to salute the president of this country who, together with his counterpart in China, ratified the Paris Climate Agreement just at the beginning of this month. And that is really going to set us on a good way. Thank you. It's what I wanted you to do. Such a cool thing. The second key part of this new plan is Goal 5, which is the one about gender equality. Actually, that, as Madeleine Albright said, I wish I had taped what her remarks were, because she said it much more beautifully than anybody I've ever heard say it before. It's not about gender equality. It's about learning to see the future through the heads, the eyes and the hearts of women, and feminizing the future of development. Because if that's not done, it will not work. Simple. And we know that if women are in charge, then these kinds of complex issues are dealt with much, much better than if it's done the other way. So in this room, we have people of power. We have people who are ready to use their power for the good of the world. We have people who are ready to engage in using sensible politics to get results. And please, all of you, come in behind the goals, but particularly come in behind feminizing this agenda, because that's the only way it will really work. Thank you.
Well, you've got the right people in the room to lead that charge. Let's now look at specific applications. What does this mean in reality through your businesses? Jane, how are you applying the SDGs into your work, particularly on women's entrepreneurship?
Well, thank you, Madeleine. Thank you, Milan. Thank you, Madeleine, Secretary Albright. One of my heroes. I'm completely starstruck. I have to just tell you that. For me, it's all about jobs. For me, economic empowerment of women is where that equality starts. If you're not economically empowered, if you're not in charge of your own finances, if you're not making your own money and being allowed to keep it, then equality is a distant dream. And so I know this story because it's my story. I immigrated here in 1983 with a suitcase in one hand and a beauty school diploma tucked in it. I went from high school to study through skill set training to become a skin therapist, and I came to pursue the American dream. And I'm privileged to be in an industry that creates more women entrepreneurs than any other, and that's the professional salon industry. 98% of all skin therapists are women, and we put more women into their own businesses. It is an industry that's growing. According to the US Department of Labor, by 2020, there will be a 40% increase in jobs in our sector for women, second only to tech. So this is an industry that I know really well because I grew up in it, and we have a blueprint of how this works. I want to see job creation for women, and that happens through entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are job creators, not job seekers. They're employing themselves and 2 or 3 other people, or 200 or 300 other people. And for me, the focus, the thing, what can we do? What's the actionable thing? I call it the missing middle. It's a middle path between high school graduation and the 4-year university degree. We focus so much on the university degree, but there is this missing middle piece, which is vocational training, it's skill set training, and it is purpose-driven education. That, in the hands of a woman, turns that woman into a job creator. And just by applying simple applications of how do we create more apprenticeships, how do we fund small businesses, it's not about $1 million of first-round funding. Most small entrepreneurs start with $25,000 of self-funding on 3 credit cards and bootstrap it up themselves. We started Dermalogica with $14,000 because we couldn't have got a toaster from the bank, let alone a bank loan. And so that was the days when they were giving away toasters if you open a bank account. And so we bootstrapped it up. And that is the American dream. That's what builds our main streets and our high streets. And I just want to see that kicked back into action. And we've got people in the room that can do it. And for me, that works to partnerships and it works to achieving goal number 5. And we're ready to roll.
Excellent. Entrepreneurship. Bob, tell us about M-Pesa. You know, I'm struck that mobile technology is not a frill for women anywhere, but particularly in the developing world. It's just an essential tool. And you've been pioneering in this space, and we need to learn how to close that gender gap. So tell us about how M-Pesa works and why it's critical.
Yes, so M-Pesa, it was developed about 8 years ago, and it was designed to move money from one place to the next using the mobile phone. So you deposit money into an agent, and the agent then puts an electronic wallet onto your phone, and you can then send that, much the same as you'd send a text message, and it's received at the other side. Today, we have about 26 million customers as a mobile phone company, 21 million of whom uses M-Pesa, and uses M-Pesa several times a day. The way it has empowered women is that, you know, in a country like Kenya, where a high percentage of women don't have access to some very basic financial services. First of all, it allows people to send money, migrant workers, to send money back home to their families without having to give it to a bus and then wait for 2 weeks for it to get there. The second thing is, as the products evolved, we have developed a saving variant of it, because there's a big challenge for the poor, and there's how do you save? It's not why do you save. And many people said that the poor don't want to save. Actually, the poor don't save because they can't save. To get to a bank can involve a trip of several tens of kilometers. The banking system in poor countries are very expensive. And so we allow you to save for as little as 1 cent, actually. So you save as and when. Now, evolving that even further to pay for healthcare, for example, poor people don't want to do insurance, because insurance is a very simple thing where you pay, and if you don't use it, you lose it. And at the end of the year, you say, we've reset it, and all the money you spent is gone. So actually, as recently as last week, we launched a thing called M-Tiba, and M-Tiba allows you to save very small amounts, 10 cents at a time, when you have the money. So when you need healthcare, you use that wallet, which is specific to clinics. We're also developing, and I can go on forever, we're also developing uses to help women through pregnancy. We have a very high incidence of maternal mortality and indeed under 5 mortality. You know, and it actually affects girls much more than boys. So as a simple tool developed in a third world country, or developed for a third world country, it is having a huge impact. And we've also seen the use of M-Pesa by women over the past 8 years has grown quite significantly, and simply empowering women in that way, in that economic way, has made a huge difference. But you know, to a point that David made earlier, if I may, you know, I don't see this as being feminizing the way we make decisions. I think it's making a more balanced approach to decision making. So if you take my own executive committee, you know, we're about 40% are women, and you know, that's still not good enough. It needs to be 50%. And I think we make a better quality decision than if we were all male or all female. So I think, David, just the refinement of what you said, it is about putting that balance. And if I make one more comment on the SDGs, you mentioned several of them, but actually they apply to all 17 goals. You know, I can give you hunger, I can give you nutrition, I can give you healthcare, I can give you peace and justice where women are deprived from some of the basic rights of ownership of land, for example. And when you consider a continent like Africa, where 80% of the farmers are small-scale women, if they can't own the land, it makes it very difficult for them to raise capital, for example.
Absolutely.
No, that's absolutely excellent point, that you cannot really achieve any of the SDGs unless we understand the pivotal role that women play. And the diversity advantage is truly an advantage, as you said. And let's turn to you in terms, Carolyn, in terms of P&G and what Procter & Gamble in its product lines and its efforts in terms of incorporating these issues into your own work in the company. How is that manifested?
Thanks, Milan. You know, the SDGs are fundamentally consistent with our company purpose, which is all about improving lives. And we aspire to make consumers' lives just that little bit better every day through superior performing products and brands. And our citizenship efforts span a multitude of SDGs, as everybody has said. They're very integrated, and and they touch everything. And gender equality is certainly one of those signature efforts. And I loved, Milan, your words about it. I loved Secretary Albright's. This is really all about a better world for all of us. And that's really the intent that we are all after, a better world for everybody through gender equality. And we see that as an equal voice and equal representation, but the voice is just as important, as everybody was saying this morning. There's really 3 areas that we're focused on. One is leveraging our voice through advertising and media to really tackle gender bias issues. And our intent there is simply to spark conversations that can motivate change. Have people seen Always Like a Girl, the Always Like a Girl campaign? You know, that was really an example that was all about an insight that girls lose confidence during puberty. And we needed to change that. We needed to help people understand that that was not okay. And so this like a girl phrase was really a negative connotation. And through the Always Like a Girl campaign, it was really about flipping that and turning that into something positive and empowering and something very strong. And so that's really how we're working to leverage our voice in media and advertising. The second piece that we're very focused on is leveraging our scale to tackle gender-biased barriers to education and to economic opportunity for women and girls. And that can be through our corporate programs like Children's Safe Drinking Water, which is certainly touches many of the SDGs, but at its heart, it's also about gender equality, because the water crisis is, the burden of that is disproportionately borne by women and girls, and that keeps them out of school, and it keeps them challenged from pursuing economic opportunities. And so Children's Safe Drinking Water is an important part of this whole thing and plays across many of the SDGs. So those are how our corporate programs, our brand programs, and our policy advocacy efforts are really helping. And then the third part that we're focused on is walking the talk internally. It's really difficult to speak about this externally if you don't have any of that playing inside the company. Mm-hmm. And so we're very focused on representation and then creating an inclusive organization, again, where men and women can fulfill their greatest potential. So those are the things that we're focused on.
Let me ask you all, do you see women's empowerment increasingly not just in your own business, but in what you observe in others as a growing part of business strategies, as opposed to just CSR or philanthropy, as important as that is, but truly integrated into the strategy of the business? And then, to the extent that you'd like to comment, what makes a successful partnership? And how, if at all, in these programs, do any of you work with civil society more broadly, with NGOs who have expertise in this space?
I think it's absolutely central to business purpose and partnerships. And one of the reasons is it's sort of empowering, this idea of empowering girls and women, quite honestly, is like the hot new branding thing. So I say that because a lot of it is on top of the surface and it looks really cool and everyone thinks, oh, that's a really good idea. But I think we've got to dig in and say, what are we actually doing? Erin and I actually from Scale Africa, Erin and I just had a conversation actually a few years ago, and we were talking about how do you even make sure that you're getting the right candidates for work. And I said, well, one of the simple things is just ask that tell your HR department, whoever's doing it, if you're the HR department, make sure 50% of the resumes or candidates you're looking at that you're actually going to interview you've got gender parity. And Erin did that for Scale Africa with a new commitment. And on the construction sites, just suddenly decided we're going to make sure that we've got gender balance in construction. There's no reason not to do it. Sometimes just that we haven't thought about it, or people make these sweeping things of, well, there aren't enough, women plumbers. Well, that's something we can all tackle through apprenticeships or whatever it might be. It's simple fixes that every one of us has to do. And in business, of course, it should be top of mind from a marketing point of view, but it's got to be absolutely embedded in the culture and DNA of the company.
So it's not just the right thing to do, it's absolutely business smart thing to do.
Absolutely the business smart thing.
Absolutely agree with everything she said. But, I sit in another group which looks at the business case for the Sustainable Development Goals. And a report that we are currently developing shows that if you look at the circular economy, the opportunity by 2030 is about $3 trillion, if you can fix that. If you look at food waste, it's about $500 billion. If you look at technology and innovation, it's about $24 trillion. If you look at fixing the gender issue, it's a $28 trillion opportunity. And so, of course, you should do it because it's the right thing to do, but the business case says that you have to do it. And in terms of embedding it into your own company, although we have about 40% at the ExCo level, and as a company we're 50-50 split, I am actually targeting each of my direct reports with very specific targets, each one of them, because we have to get to 50-50. Our board is about 36% female, which incidentally is a lot better than we find here in the United States. The C-suite occupied in Africa, a higher percentage are occupied by women in Africa than they are here in the United States. But you have to start really at the primary school level. So we have Women in Technology initiative, which takes girls from as young as 6 and teaches them why the opportunities are there. Because girls say, well, if I work for a mobile phone company, do I have to climb the mast? And he says, well, you have 2 legs and 2 arms, so of course you can. But incidentally, today's world, it's not about physical strength, it's about brain power.
I agree with what people have said. I think it fundamentally has to be integrated into the business strategy. And I think when you do that, it becomes, it perpetuates the ability to do good over time. So, the Always Like a Girl campaign that I just mentioned, that's part of the campaign, and it helps to shape impressions, and it motivates people, and it builds girls' confidence. But it also, by virtue of being a great brand campaign, gives us the resources that we can continue to develop our puberty education program, which has been a program that the Always brand has stood for decades. And I think at last count, it has taken 17 million girls through this puberty education program, which gives them access to schools, helps them deal with that, gives them access to products that enable them to stay in school. And so that combination is really the full integration into the business strategy. I want to comment on your point on partnerships, because I think with partnerships, that's critical to us making progress in this area. And we have so many great partners in this work, many of them in this room, many of them that we're working with over the course of this week and every day. But I think the key to partnerships is finding the complementary capabilities that we each have. Because we can't do this alone, and we may have some capabilities to bring to the effort, and our partners have many, many others. So our Children's Safe Drinking Water program is a technology that came from laundry detergent. Go figure, laundry detergent and clean water. But it was the ability to isolate the particles and take them out the way you do as you're cleaning laundry that enabled us to create these water purification packets. So we had this great technology, we had this great capability, we knew how to make the product. We couldn't get it distributed, we couldn't get it to the right places, and so the partnerships that we have with many NGOs were about finding those complementary capabilities. I think very easily, and I think the SDGs stand for this, we get to the goals, we get to the common goals, we know the world we want to live in. The question is, how do we channel our capabilities working together to get to those goals faster? And I think when we work together, we can have a greater impact than each of us can have on our own.
I didn't answer the question on partnership. The one word I'd say is patience. Because, inevitably you have to do the partnership, but we have to be patient about it. It doesn't get fixed overnight.
Always a good caution. I'm going to turn this over to all of you for your questions or comments in a minute, but let me ask David, not as the businessman on this panel, but as someone who has worked with the business community and particularly through the United Nations observed how this is beginning to take shape. How do you see businesses looking at their role in the SDGs?
It's been one of the absolute joys is to watch the way in which businesses have said that they are ready to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and incorporate them into their core business models. I mean, the three examples here are, of course, right at the leading edge and giving the kind of the direction to the others. But I did just want to slip a bit sideways to a little concern I've got, and it may explain to Bob why I chose that to say so strongly that I think the goals need to be approached in a feminist way. Not everything is moving in a good direction. There are countries and communities in the world where the space for women is shrinking. There are settings in the world where the treatment given to women is really worsening. And one of the reasons is that we've got communities who believe that specifically identifying the challenges faced by women is somehow not necessary in government, in business, or indeed in all of life. Take, for example, the challenges we're having with women, refugees, and migrants. If you talk to groups of refugees and migrants and manage to talk to women on their own, they will tell you that they dress drab, they try to hide, they do everything they can not to be noticed because they don't want to be targeted, victimized, and sometimes treated badly. And yet, because of their obligations to do what they can for their children or for the older people that they're moving with, they are incredibly vulnerable. They don't have proper facilities for sanitation or for menstrual health, and there are very big difficulties with incorporating that into planning decisions because the people who are doing the decision-making are men, and by and large they just don't bring into their consciousness that women may need different kinds of facilities and different kind of thinking to help them. But it applies in so many other walks of life that if we've reverted back to a situation where men are making more and more of the decisions and are squeezing women out of the decision-making space, then we find that banking, health, education, and other issues are denied to women, sometimes in a systematic way. And that's why I'm being a bit aggressive at the moment about the need for a feminist approach to the goals.
I think, though, on the topic of migrant and the refugee crisis, I mean, we see even on the UN site, there's the model of the Yazidi women that have been trained in making baked goods and selling them and making money as small entrepreneurs. And that idea, I believe strongly, that if we can embed some kind of skill set training, especially targeted to women, that they can at least make a small amount of money, that's the piece that's going to bring us equality faster than anything else. I understand the sentiment of feminizing the approach, but I think the approach is equalizing the opportunity. And the way to get those women to have voices is when they no longer fear that they're reliant on someone else to provide food, clothing, and shelter, and they can actually stand up and stand out. And I think, for me anyway, that's where our focus is absolutely going to be.
But I don't think Bob and David are in conflict with each other. I think Bob's point about balance is about the perspective that women have and their experiences that have to affect decision making. So and will make a difference. So I think we.
Yeah, I also think, we shouldn't fall into the trap of saying that women will necessarily make the right decisions either. I have a call
We are
center.
fallible too.
But we'd like to see that. But we'd like to make sure they have a choice. I mean, I think we should decide anything for women. Why don't? I mean, with all respect, I think this idea of, we'll decide what's good for women or something. I mean, that feels so disempowering in itself. We have to make sure that we at least find out. Agreed?
No, I absolutely agree. But my point is this. If I take my call center, for example, I do an open door thing, and some of the people in the call center will come to me and they say, Bob, we have a problem because we have a slot at which we are allowed to go to the toilet. And when we're pregnant, we can't just go to the toilet when the slot comes up. And when you look at the management structure above them, they're all women. And you think, what's the matter with you people? Why can't you see it? So I think we need to actually get men.
Well, they're not in the minority that they don't see.
They're
I
in
mean,
the
I don't think that's gender.
I don't want to disempower the panel, but I want to empower the audience here. So let's maybe
There's a lot that don't
if
get
you
it.
could do something with these lights because we can't see anybody. But anybody who has a comment or a question, let's start there. Tell us who you are and to whom you're directing your question.
Well, I'm to entrepreneurship. I am a real estate developer and in construction.
Here you go.
Yes, I'm from Mexico City. I'm a real estate developer and construction. And we have an empowerment center in Mexico for children, for women. And we also have, I agree with trying to make entrepreneurs out of women. But I also agree that not every woman can be an entrepreneur.
Of course.
I think that is not the case. But I also think that, when they have economic empowerment, that is what will make the difference. And about empowerment, as you said, it's very easy to say, very difficult to teach. Nobody teaches you really how to get there or how to be empowered. So one of the initiatives that we are doing in Mexico is really giving courses, a 15-day course on different levels of society, to really empower and give classes on what empowerment really is, because nobody really knows how to teach or how to learn how to be empowered. Thank you.
Okay,
I think
thank
the
you.
point on entrepreneurship too. We did a study actually through a CGI commitment 2 years ago called Fight Future Entrepreneurs. We took 10 young women out of school and out of work in New York City, and we put them through a skill set training in our industry, and then followed them so that they, to see what happened. They all got 100% pass on the state board license and 100% placement in work in top accounts like Equinox here, top account SOA, Med Spa on the Upper West Side. But what we realized was, in order to get them not just working in an environment, but owning that business, there has to be a piece of entrepreneurship training separate to the skill set. We actually partnered with Operation Hope on financial literacy, etc. But there has to be an entrepreneurship training, which is coupled. You're 100% right. There has to be more than just a sense of.
Okay, others? Let's go here, and then we'll start here, and then go back there, and then there.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jessica Posner O'Dede with Shining Hope for Communities, SHOFCO. And I guess my question, Bob, I have a question for you, which is, as we're talking about the SDGs and talking about these amazing goals that are talked about in places like this, at places like the UN, how do we bridge the gap between these goals and people on the ground who are actually living the experiences, and how are you thinking about that and seeing change happen?
Excellent.
I think when we talk about SDGs and sustainability, even in a business environment, sometimes it's a little bit alienating. I think you need to really, Jessica and I are living in the same country, and I'm a big admirer of the work that they do in SHOFCO. I think you need to really define it in very simple terms. And first of all, and the second thing is we need to make sure the citizens are beginning to challenge us as leadership. Because whilst the governments are signed up to it, I think the private sector has a bigger role to play in enabling and empowering that than governments, because governments typically are 5-year, they have a 5-year life. Yeah. Whereas businesses should, if you take Procter & Gamble, for example, it's had a very long life. So the citizens should be demanding of their leaders that they are delivering on these things. If you talk about 17 goals, it's a lot. 169 targets is a lot. But if you talk about the girl child, and if you talk about your girls in Shofco and Kibera, for example, and 2 weeks ago we were launching a water project, and you describe it in a very simple way, where a woman stands there and she says, "Bob, you don't understand what you have just done in funding this water project, because now my daughter can go fetch the water because she doesn't have to walk more than 8 minutes away. If it's more than 8 minutes, she will be raped. My 12-year-old daughter will be raped on the way home." And so fixing those injustices, I think the citizens need to be empowered to be asking the questions, whether they be women, whether they be, whatever they are, need to be asking the questions and pushing. And I don't think that we've done enough to empower the citizens to demand of us what they should be demanding right now.
Reality on the ground. The gentleman in the back.
I'm a lady, actually, but that's okay.
I thought there was a guy who had his hand up, but go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Anne Bigging, and I'm from Germany. I run a company called Healing Hotels of the World. And we are, as you know, Germany has a huge influx of Syrian refugees. And we are working with these refugees, especially women and children. And what I feel is we have to listen to them more, because they are very strong and very wise people. And sometimes I think with all our ideas, we victimize them. So just an idea. Thank you.
Okay. Here, yes.
Oh, do I get a mic? Oh, no, I'll just shout. Hi, I'm Amy Willard. Amy Willard Cross, and of the Vibe Index. And you talked earlier about sort of the faddishness of gender equality. And you talked earlier, sorry, Amy Willard Cross, Biop Index. You talked earlier about the faddishness of gender equality. People are putting it sort of on the outside of packages. Your company's doing great things on the inside, so is yours. How do we as citizens hold more organizations or corporations accountable to actually doing gender equality instead of just making pretty pictures about it?
Excellent. Let's, Carolyn.
I'll give you a point of view on it, but I think it's similar to the conversation we just had about talking to consumers, talking to the people who are on the ground, talking to these very strong and determined and inspiring women that are migrants. So I think it's some of the same thing that says, as we do this work, if we're not going to do the other part of it, which is the impact part of it, if it just is a pretty picture and if it's just an advertising campaign without the meat underneath it, I actually think our employees and our consumers see through that. I think there are things that can be a great brand campaign, but they have to have an impact with it. Otherwise, they become empty words, and I think people see through empty words very, very quickly. So I think that there is something that is self-correcting in it, and the ones that are successful are the ones that have a lot of impact and a lot of intentionality.
I agree.
Business usually measures the bottom line, so I would think that in these initiatives, you would monitor and evaluate.
We do, and certainly as we take many of our programs, they do contribute to the bottom line, but I think there's a responsibility beyond that says as it contributes to the bottom line, it gives you resources and it gives you the ability to do good with the other part of it. So always is going to contribute in it, and the brand may grow, but as a result, it must continue to invest in puberty education. It must continue to stand for keeping girls in school and helping them in these different pieces. And it's got to be both of those things, or it doesn't fulfill the obligation that it has tried to inspire.
I think we have to hold our brands and our governments and our companies and ourselves accountable. And I think there's never been better transparency, truly. I mean, it's really not hard to find out pretty much anything about any company or any brand, what they're doing and what the impact is. And I think that actually the appetite for that amongst every one of us is increasing of, I really actually want to know more about that, whatever it might be. And I think all responsible companies are stepping up to that and fulfilling it. But we all should hold ourselves accountable for making sure.
Well, and when I said bottom line, I didn't say you measure the bottom line, you do that typically as a business, but that you take the practice
Yes, we
and
do.
measure and
Yes, we do.
evaluate and monitor the initiatives.
Thank you, Milan, and for that clarification. Absolutely, that's what we do, and we set very specific goals. So I think that business application to the goal setting, and I think to your point, we have to be patient, but we also have to be constructively impatient because we have to make more progress. And
You have to deliver.
So we can make a little bit of an impact, or we can make a bigger impact by setting stretching goals, and that's where I think the capabilities of the partners come together. We will get there faster if we work it together.
Okay? We'll go to you, sir. There's a hand that keeps going up behind this gentleman. Okay, we'll go to you.
Hi, I'm T.H. Culhane, Director of the Solar Cities Urban Home Biogas Initiative. And I wanted to thank you in particular, Carolyn, because you talked about funding complementary partnerships to get the technologies where they need to be. 10 years ago, you funded us, your CSR group in Cairo, Egypt, in order to give women and children in the Zabaleen garbage pickers community their first solar hot showers with solar hot water panels that they built themselves, thanks to your funding with our organization.
Excellent.
So God bless you for that, and hope these continue.
Could I just say to that point, the role of women in climate is often discounted and yet critical to adaptation and mitigation. And we really, many of us are trying to work on collecting those best practices and other models that can be scaled and replicated more significantly. So it's a very good point. Thanks. Now I'm going to go there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Amanda Ellis from the East West Centre. Thank you for a wonderful panel. I have a follow-up question for David around accountability for governments in the same way that the question was asked about the private sector. The latest research from the World Bank shows that over 90% of countries still have at least one gender discriminatory law on the books. How is the UN helping to hold governments accountable so that the playing field will be less skewed?
Excellent. David, all of the woes of government are now on your back in answering.
See, the valuable thing about this agreement is that it's the member states of the United Nations who themselves came together and said that they would do it, and they've also set up an annual review process called the High-Level Political Forum every July, which is their own accounting environment. We can and do help them to hold themselves to account, and our organization, UN Women, is particularly involved in it. The leader of UN Women was due to be here today from Sile. She can't because she's participating in a big summit we've got on migrants and refugees. If she were sitting here, she would say, we produce the information that helps to identify where governments are not fulfilling what they're supposed to be doing, and that in turn helps them to change, but we can't compel them. What I wanted to say was actually a bit related to an earlier comment, which is that whether it's governments or businesses, the key to the future is the power of the citizen as an auditor. I find this word accountability quite difficult because it doesn't always say who the accounts are being rendered to and who then is actually calling others to account. So I've tried to promote this new term of citizen audit, where people, particularly young people, actually see their role is to hold their legislators, their businesses, their churches and other organizations they belong to account for promises that are made using the 169 targets of the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for that work. And I'm particularly keen on seeing this citizen audit done by people under the age of 25. We're beginning to develop some new cell phone apps that make that easier, and we hope that that will at least contribute to the very difficult process of how you hold leaders to account for promises they make.
Excellent. We have time for 2 questions. We're going to take them at the same time, and then any of the panelists. Go ahead.
Hi, Ellen Morris from Sustainable Energy Solutions, working on energy access in Africa. And just had a quick question about building the pool of women engineers and technical people, because that's a huge issue in utilities, not only in Africa, but in US, where you have 90% are men, 10% are women. And the thing you commonly hear is that the pool is not big enough of women engineers and technically trained people. So I'm just wondering how you start to address that, maybe from the Safaricom side.
And the other question? Yes. You.
Hi, I'm Erica Balduino with Twilio.org. So you all have talked about women. Erica Balbuena from Twilio.org. You all have talked about women kind of at the beginning of their life cycle coming into business or becoming an entrepreneur, but how do we keep and sustain women throughout their careers, whether they're a part of our company and that's a 100-person company or a 100,000-person company? What very specific tactical efforts can we all do to keep women engaged in the workforce?
Okay, who wants to start with either of answering either or both?
Okay, let me deal with both. So on how do we train technologists? You know, we looked at our, despite being 50-50, when I looked at my technology functions, it was 17% women. And we realized that we needed to really start, as I said earlier, from 6 years old. So this women in technology thing, we over-index on women as interns. So we always have a minimum of 20 young women as interns, and we develop them throughout their career. Whether they want to come to work for my company or not, it doesn't matter. You raise a very good point about how do you retain, because actually when I looked at my statistics as recently as last Friday, I saw that we were losing as many women as we were bringing in. And so whilst we're over-indexing on recruitment, we're also over-indexing. And so some of the things that we've put in place, for example, are childcare facilities. So in each of our offices, we have full-time, fully professional childcare facilities, taking children from birth almost, all the way until they're about 14 years old. We have extended the maternity leave, which I believe even here in the United States, it's not that clever.
You don't have paid maternity leave.
Apparently, you have to be sick to be pregnant. But
Yeah,
you know,
medical disability.
So what we do is we offer more than the minimum requirements of 4 months fully paid maternity leave. And when you return after work, we realize that that bonding process can be quite difficult, and so we reduce the working hours for women on full pay for a further 6 months. And these are some of the things that we're doing in order to hopefully retain, because it's a huge investment to bring them in the first place. But they're the kind of things we're doing to retain women. But it is a big challenge for us.
I want to jump on the question of retaining women. We see women entrepreneurs coming into our industry and many others, usually at the time they're starting to have a family. And the reason is they feel it unsustainable to stay in the workforce because it's not possible to juggle everything. I raised 2 daughters with my husband, and it was hard enough, for us, and we had our own business. I think that, to your point, it's critical that companies recognise that and really talk to everybody, men and women, everyone in the company, about what's required. Because even if it's a 4-month leave or a 1-year maternity leave or a 2-year maternity leave, your child still can't feed itself and take care of itself all day if you go back to work. It's still going to need something in the home or outside of the home. So I think that's critical. That's where we've got to kind of reimagine the whole working environment.
We've been doing a number of pieces of work on that, and I think it's intentionality, and I think it's approaching issues the same way we would approach business issues, because that's indeed what it is. So, we have the 100,000 range employees, 45% of our managers are women, 40% of our board is women, but we're very intentional on all of the different pieces of it. So we recruit equally, we retain fairly equally, and we have probably 30% of our executive team is women. And so we do see a little bit of a drop-off. And as we have diagnosed that, we're looking at life stage choices. We are looking at mobility situation, which frankly affects men and women. We're also looking at policy, to your point, from a maternity or a parenting leave standpoint, and we're making changes in all of those places. We're very intentional in how we do staffing and how we do development and how we train people. And then those are things relative to our staffing and development process. The other part that's really critical is dealing with the unconscious bias that just exists in every one of us. And so we're very focused on creating that inclusive environment. We're very focused on ensuring that men and women are part of this solution. This is not a woman's issue. This is not a girl's issue. This is a societal issue. This is something we all have to address. So it's really the intentionality about that. The other thing I want to comment on is we have to hold our partners to that same level of, to that same expectation. And so as we define this, we have our own employees, but we also have suppliers that we work with, agency partners that we work with, distributors who represent our business in other places. And we have the same expectation of them. You know, we've been on a decade-long journey in Saudi to get women to be part of that workplace because we know it will strengthen our business. And we're at 15%. 10 years later. You know, now people say, wow, 15%, that's really great. You've provided an environment where they can come to work and be part of work, but we in no way are finished with that. You know, we have so much more to do. And that's where it gets into, in some cases, societal norms. We have to work with local regulators in many cases. In India, we had to work to change access for women to the manufacturing floor because they were only allowed to work the day shift. So we had to work with local regulators and change the law, and we have now one plant in India where 30% of the workers on the floor are women. These things can have an impact, but we do have to set a very high expectation of ourselves and then demand that of those partners, anybody who touches our business.
Thank you.
I think you're trying to stop us. And
Well, if you want the last word, be my
well,
guest.
I don't really, but I just want to echo what Jane said, that she used the word reimagine. These Sustainable Development Goals give us all an opportunity to think, act, organize, communicate, and report in a totally different way if we want to. And because they've been agreed by all the leaders in this rather extraordinary way, we've got a total right to do it. And I just, as we leave, please keep on reimagining. Stuff doesn't have to be like it is. Thank you.
Excellent point. Reimagine and do. And if I can just say here at the conclusion of this extraordinary panel, but really at the conclusion of this Women and Girls session, which we have had, didn't start like this in the earliest days of CGI. It was really a fledgling, and today it's quite a grown-up enterprise. And to that we owe the commitments and the efforts of so many of you. And I hope that even though there won't be another session like this, because CGI will be no longer as it's been, that each of you will continue in the work that you've done, the steadfastness, the perseverance, the commitment, the diligence to keep this going in all of your work. The commitments don't begin and end at CGI. They continue in a sustainable way for all of the years to come. So thank you for all you do. Thank you to this extraordinary panel, and thank you for all that you will continue to do. Thanks.
Jason Momoa.